Hey, Facebook family, it's been a while since we did a little walk. My last post was Election Day with my chainsaw and my commitment to pray for whoever the eventual winner of various elections would be, including the president, and certainly am doing that. Whether it's our current president or the next president, whoever that may be. And I'm okay, by the way, as I would hope every person who voted for Trump is, that to accept the results of the election. My goodness. And so grateful. I believe personally that our democracy is working. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I really believe it is, and including the court systems and various checks and balances, and everybody has a voice, and especially with social media, be that as it may, I want my voice out there, but not in a toxic way. So even if I do hold a position currently that is not yours, again, my Father is a merciful Father, and I'm trying to be like Him. And Jesus, His Son, says to turn the other cheek. And He says to get the plank out of your eye. And then maybe you can see and remove the speck in your brother's. But come on, y'all. We got some planks. Let's deal with our planks. Search me, oh God. Hey, I actually want to talk about something sort of specific. And that is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or process, because the spin from some of the media is that would be a really bad thing in America. I don't know if it would or not. My tendency to think is, in this political climate, we wouldn't be able to trust the federal government to do that. But let me just say, the idea of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is something that happened in South Africa, right? As white minority rule in a black majority nation was coming to an end. The most famous name is Bishop Desmond Tutu, but the leaders of the church primarily foresaw the need for conversations among past and current enemies to be able to transition to a new government where the majority, the black and underclass, were able to govern, to avoid a bloodbath. And the way I've heard it reported recently is negative, because if that were done in America, the way conservative media is portraying such a thing is sort of like a Nuremberg trial of war criminals. Keep a list of those Trump workers and, punish them. And that's not, if that's your idea of a truth and reconciliation, that's the opposite, because in South Africa, the whole goal was to avoid violence and bloodshed, and to really get at an honest dialogue about power sharing and racial issues and all of that. So it's not a question of if you think South Africa is a gleaming example today of a great government or not, but the process probably did save many lives in South Africa. Now, my paradigm for truth and reconciliation is not primarily the public political sphere, right? It's what God's been doing since the garden. The Bible is a very honest reckoning of our many sins. Those, aside from Jesus, every character in the Bible has weaknesses and failures and moments of sometimes just crazy stuff that people did, right? So So we are all in that story, right? We're all in the sin story together, and we're all in the redemption story if we choose Jesus as our leader of history. Now, if Jesus is leading the process, it's already a truth and reconciliation commission. That's what God's program through all the nations, because at the cross, he tore down the dividing line of hostility between Jews and Gentiles, representing the whole rest of the world, and he created a new humanity within his own body. And it's a humanity that's, the starting place is our common need of grace, because we are all sick, we are all in need of a doctor, and God through Christ is reconciling all people to himself. Jesus is the reconciler, and he is the great mediator and the great intercessor. He's the great gatherer. He's the sheep, the shepherd of the sheep who are harassed and hapless, and we need him. If we don't see our need of him, then we're opting for realpolitik, whatever the politics du jour of the day would be. And that's shifting sands, and that's instability, and that's all of the negative traffic that we see in our culture and media and so forth. But that's not where we need to set our gaze, right? We need to develop that vertical that I see you, God, and I believe that my prayers matter because you are hearing and you are answering, and if I am in agreement with your desires and your will as the King of the kingdom, then you have said that your kingdom is always increasing. Now that's just good news, y'all. The kingdom of God is not diminished. It is ever increasing. The life of Jesus is an indestructible seed planted in the soil of our human history, and it will have its way. Jesus will be Lord. The end of history, every knee and every tongue will bow and acknowledge that he's the rightful leader of us all. So there you go. That's my conviction. But where truth and reconciliation in the secular or public sphere is concerned, I want to suggest my favorite. It's not a government, but here in Alabama we do have the star of Just Mercy, the author Bryan Stevenson. He wrote the book that was made into a movie. Michael B. Jordan played him in the movie. But anyway, Bryan Stevenson is a Christian lawyer, one of my former students. I'm going to turn around because this air blower is going to be super loud. One of my Birmingham Southern College students who graduated in like 2000, Evan Milligan. He went off to NYU, became a lawyer. Actually went to South Africa first. He spent some time in South Africa. Then went to law school. So Evan is with EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, as a lawyer. But now what he's done for the last few years is he is Bryan Stevenson's point man for all of the communities that want to place a memorial where there were lynchings in their location. And if you've heard anything about the work of Equal Justice Initiative, they have both a legacy museum, which helps people understand kind of the long storyline of from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, and I highly, highly recommend it. This is great learning venue. So, and then about a mile and a half from there in Montgomery, there is the Peace and Justice Memorial, which is also known as the Lynching Memorial. And there are these, and there's growing research to find more of lynchings that occurred in America, but each community where those lynchings happen has the opportunity, again with assistance from people like my former student in InterVarsity, Evan Milligan, he coordinates it. Any of those initiatives in local communities across the country go through his desk. And I'm just kind of proud of that. You never know in campus ministry which one of these skinny... Evan was skinny, he was tall, he had dreadlocks, he was in the gospel choir. Now he's kind of bald and a little pudgy. Sorry, Evan, if you're watching this. But anyway, I just want to know, you to know, if you are, Evan, I'm really inspired by your life and what you're doing. And I want to say the process of that museum and the vision of it as it's unfolding is that for communities like, say, Gadsden, Alabama, for example, where my ancestors founded the city of Gadsden. And Gadsden, about an hour and a half northeast of Birmingham, it has a racial past just like every southern city. But they placed a lynching memorial, an equal justice initiative memorial. A black man was lynched from the prominent bridge over the Coosa River. And so that's powerful. That's a kind of truth and reconciliation process that's less in the hands of politicians, right? And more in the hands of local citizens. And so the way it gets owned, the way it gets processed and celebrated when those signs, landmarks marking the lynching are done is honoring. The goal is to be honoring, right? And to build a table of brotherhood and to bring healing to communities where, God is not pleased when anything that's ungodly is suppressed, is kept hidden. So bringing our history of lynchings to the forefront in America, there's a right way to do it that brings healing and unity, and then there's a wrong way to do it, which frankly seems like that's what the media likes to cover is and promote, is the way to hate each other more, misjudge each other more, build straw arguments of your enemies and then burn them up more, rather than the hard work of sitting down, looking at an obvious injustice. If you can't acknowledge that lynchings in America, in the South primarily, is a horror, then at least acknowledge that, and then be a part of a process in your community. One of our student leaders at UAB is on the Jefferson County Memorial Project, which is the Birmingham location. And I feel like this is a way that young people, Christian young people, can be a part of the process, right? Be a part of the Equal Justice Initiative's marking of lynchings, whether it's Arkansas, wherever it is, Florida, wherever, Texas. And, we need to pray because there's still sharks in those waters, right? You're swimming with sharks sometimes because there are people with heavy political agendas, and a lot of it is political activism, partisan activism, and not just building goodwill and deepening trust and owning our past as communities. So there you go. I just want to say, if you hear Tucker Carlson say something about how bad and wrong, now maybe the Democrats' version of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission would be a Trump war crimes tribunal. He may be right about that, but let's not pretend that what happened in South Africa is a bad thing. No, it was a good thing. I want to be on record for saying that was a very good thing. Saved many lives, set the tone for the new government. And y'all, we are seeing God shift times and seasons. Not just the election, not just who's in power. God's shifting hearts. God's shifting attitudes. God's wanting people who, like Dr. King said, part of his I Have a Dream speech was the sons of slave owners, the grandsons of slave owners and the grandsons of slaves would sit down at a table of brotherhood. And I'll end with this story. When Lucy and I inherited, my grandmother died in Gadsden, and she had a lot of the old furniture from way back. So Gabriel Hughes, who owned at one point 200 slaves. Now, he didn't own them, actually. He might have owned a dozen, but he tried to grow rice along the Coosa River in what became Gadsden. And so he hired the lowlands of South Carolina plantation owners and their slaves who knew how to grow rice there to come to Alabama and experiment with growing rice. And so at one point there were 200 slaves in Gadsden. So I come from that, you guys. But again, my dad, the grandson of Gabriel Hughes, and his brother Bob were both Methodist ministers who lost their status in the Methodist Conference in Alabama because of their bold prophetic stance to preach brotherhood, racial brotherhood in the 50s in Alabama. So I had come from that too. Point being, when the family furniture was being divvied up, Lucy and I inherited the oldest of all the artifacts, and it was a table made by slaves. It was made for Gabriel Hughes. And not a big table. It's not like a dining room table or even a coffee table. It's more like an end table made with pegs. But anyway, it was the sentimental, it was the storyline that was significant. And without telling the whole story, one of my colleagues with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship was the director of the Black Campus Ministries, Alex Anderson, very good friend, mentor in prayer. And he was speaking at a conference we did on Jesus, Jubilee, and Justice back in 1991 in Lake Swan, Florida, Lake Swan Camp. Anyway, God led Lucy and I to give that table made by slaves of my great-great-grandfather to Alex and Felicia and their 5 kids who were at the conference. And so we did that. So it was an act of jubilee, right? God restoring inheritances, righting wrongs, giving the land rest, because the land is groaning under our feet because of so much injustice over so many generations. So that was a small act of truth and reconciliation, right? Acknowledging that my family directly benefited from slavery to some degree. My family directly benefited from Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act because Gabriel Hughes founded Gadsden 1 year after Indian removal of the Cherokee from Turkeytown in northeast Alabama. Truth, reconciliation. God likes it. God is reconciling all people to himself through Jesus, to the cross. And as hard as it is to face our sin, our failures as an individual, as a group of people, we must, as Christians, more than the secularist, more than the socialist, we must be the ones leading that process. I've wanted to see the church in Alabama do what Brian Stevenson is doing. Now, he's got the leadership now, and there are many Christians helping, but there's a lot of Hindu and Muslim and secularists and Jews helping too. Maybe that's just better than just the church. But I think you get my drift. God is the one doing it. God is the one interested in truth, in the innermost being. And so as we tell our national stories, as we teach in our universities or around our kitchen tables to our kids, what is America? Somehow we need to be able to tell a story that's honest, like God tells the story of Israel, his own people, in the Bible, and it's very honest. It's not flattering. Same is true in America. You've got Christian leaders quoting Thomas Paine as an example to follow. And Thomas Paine, one of the patriots among the founding fathers, thought Jesus was a fable. So we need to be careful. Who are we really partnering with? So let's be that church today. Let's be that reconciling community, beloved community, committed to truth and reconciliation through the gospel, because Jesus is creating right now, always has been, a new humanity. Love you guys.